This is a Philippine ghost story written by Pim Rolino on the Reddit page R No Sleep 9 years ago. And if you like this video, please subscribe. Thank you. And this is part 2 of the Philippine ghost story. In the last video, we heard about his mom's ghost story. Now we're learning about the uncle's ghost story as well as his own. We left off with them being on a road trip. Later on in the trip, we visited my uncle, who lived a few towns over. There, he lived with his family, where he ran a very lucrative farming business. On the way there, we passed a long bridge that went over a steep ravine with a river below. As our car rode along the bridge, I couldn't help but feel a sense of deja vu. It made sense since I'd traveled over this bridge many times before when I visited my uncle and cousins. However, underneath that feeling was a sense of unadulterated fear and dread, like something bad had happened here, and it somehow directly affected me. A distant memory screaming to be remembered. As if on cue, my dad pointed out that this bridge was infamous to the surrounding towns and city because of the White Lady. Now, like the Capri and the Tiyaknak, the White Lady is another one of the ubiquitous ghost stories told around the country. She is perhaps the most well known. Different countries also have their own version. In America, she's usually called the Lady in White. In Spanish culture, she's the La Llorona. The basic idea remains the same: a ghostly-looking woman dressed in a long white dress and long dark hair. She stands on the side of isolated roads waiting to hitch a ride. Scenarios vary, but in Philippines, if you stopped and gave her a ride, she would quietly enter your back seat. If you don't interact with her, she'll leave you alone until she disappears from your car some distance later. If you see her on the road and keep driving, she will suddenly appear in your car and attack you. Moral is that it's better to give her a ride than to not give her a ride. When we finally arrived at Uncle's large house, I couldn't shake the feeling that the bridge had somehow directly affected me. After a delicious dinner and a round of video games with my cousins, I found my uncle out in the balcony having a drink. He offered me a beer. Since I was finally old enough, I took a seat next to him. "Hey Tito, do you remember anything about the bridge right outside of town?" He put his drink down and regarded me for a few minutes. Then he cut straight to the chase. "You were really young when it happened. I suppose you don't remember much." Now I was fully intrigued. I had to know. What exactly happened? His warm smile faded, and he told his tale. As the story went on, the memories began to flood my mind, memories that I had long since repressed as a defense mechanism. All the details came to me in excruciating clarity, as if it happened yesterday. By the time he had finished the story, there was no denying it. I had encountered a ghost all those years ago. It was the mid-90s, and I was still living in the Philippines. I was a plucky 6-year-old that was all about adventure and exploring. Once or twice a week, I would spend the night at my uncle's farm, back then a small budding business. The town it was in was smaller then, and fairly remote. I loved that place because there was so many areas to explore, but only in daytime. One particular night, I was over at his place just watching TV. My uncle got a call of a new delivery of chicken feed that needed to be picked up in the next town. At that time, he only had a few farmhands, and they all had the night off. Usually, he wouldn't make a supply run this late at night, but he was behind schedule and needed to pick up the supplies or risk losing profit. As he headed out, he asked me if I wanted to tag along. Ever the restless child, I immediately agreed. My uncle had an old Toyota SUV that he used for all of his delivery pickups. I sat in the second row, my usual spot, while my uncle slid into the driver's seat. Most of the voyage was uneventful. It was nearly 11 p.m. at night, so there was hardly any other vehicles on the road. Upon crossing the bridge the first time, nothing happened. During that time, the bridge was newly constructed. It was put up the year before after the original bridge was ravaged by the last typhoon. The city even put streetlights on the new bridge for better visibility. That was a huge deal since none of the other surrounding roads had streetlights. We arrived at the next town and I helped my uncle load up the supplies, well, at least as much as a small 6-year-old can. On the way back home was when it happened. I was sitting in the back seat, absent-mindedly looking out the window, when I felt the car slow down. We were almost at the bridge, and I noticed that something wasn't right. I was too small to see over the seat and out the windshield, but I could tell that all lights on the bridge were off. At this point, the car slowed to a crawl. "Hey, sport, why don't you lie down and take a nap?" my uncle said from the front seat. Something in his voice didn't sound right. It sounded like he was scared and was struggling to hide it. "No, that's okay. I'm not tired." "Please, just do it for me, okay?" He sounded stern but measured. My uncle was usually an easygoing guy, so when he got serious, you should pay attention. "Okay," I said as I laid down on the seat sideways. I briefly saw my uncle's eyes in the rearview mirror. They showed unmistakable fear. I felt the familiar bump that signaled that we were on the bridge. Then the car stopped. "Close your eyes, okay? No matter what, keep them closed." "Okay." I started to get scared. I didn't know what was happening or why I had to close my eyes. Regardless, I shut them tight. Then the strangest thing happened. My uncle started to sing. It was a traditional Filipino folk song, and I'd only heard it once before, about a year ago. My aunt and uncle got into a shouting match, as in a things were thrown across the room type of shouting match. I was at their house at the time, and my cousins and I stayed in their room, cowering and waiting for the storm to pass. An hour later, my uncle entered the room, apologized for shouting. He then started singing that song to lull us to sleep. The melody was beautiful, and I'd never known my uncle could sing that well. He never did it again, at least not until that moment when we were in that dark bridge. The song sounded just as beautiful, but I could tell his voice was shaking. His car wasn't that big, but I was a small child, and there was a lot of room in the second row. I was laying down on the seat perpendicular to the windows, trying and hoping for sleep to come. Instead, something else arrived. Click, click. I heard the familiar mechanism of the headlights flashing. All of a sudden, I sensed that I wasn't alone in the second row anymore. My spatial awareness of the car told me that there was someone or something else sitting right next to me. We had gained another passenger. I shut my eyes even tighter as my uncle began to drive. The temperature inside the car became cold. I curled myself into a ball, seeking refuge from whatever it was that was now right next to me. I didn't know much about ghosts and supernatural creatures at that age, and though I couldn't see it, something told me that I was in the presence of something not of this world. Uncle finished the song and started over. I was amazed that he was able to keep his composure. I refused to open my eyes. I could hear her. She was so uncomfortably close to me. At first I heard what sounded like clicking. As it increased in volume, it sounded like stalks of celery being twisted and broken. Crack, 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 crack. It was unnerving. Those sounds weren't normal. They were all around me. We finally crossed over the bridge, but she was still there. I was so scared I could barely move. The car hit a bump which caused me to slide to the side closer to her, and I felt a damp cloth against my leg. My breaths became shallow and I started to cry. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I opened my eyes for a split second. In that split second, I saw her, a brief flash of white, with stringy damp hair on her head, blacker than night. She was turned away from me. I blinked the tears from my eyes. When I opened them again, the mass of black hair was now right in front of my face. Again, I shut my eyes tightly. After what seemed like an eternity, the car hit a familiar curve on the road that signaled the entrance into our town. I felt the entity come closer to me. By this time my uncle was silent. No more songs. The air became even colder right next to my face, and I shook, not from the cold, but from terror. Then she spoke, right into my ear. It was a hushed whisper, lower than any whisper I've ever heard. I couldn't make out what she said. It didn't sound threatening or angry. It sounded sad. And then she was gone. I immediately felt the difference. I could no longer feel another presence in the car, and the air went from cold to tropical humid again. I heard my uncle breathe a sigh of relief. Didn't open my eyes until we reached the safety of the farm. My uncle had to carry me back inside and straight into my bed, and only then did I open my eyes. From what I could recall, we never spoke of that night to anyone, not even to each other. Subsequent trips across the bridge at night never resulted in another white lady sighting, at least not for me. I'd find out later that in the early 80s, a woman was found dead at the bottom of that bridge. People said that she was traveling to the next town and was hoping to catch a ride with any passing vehicles. It was late at night, and she had no family nearby that could give her a ride. No one knows what really happened, but many suspected that it was murder. After my trip back to the Philippines, I couldn't stop thinking about that night at the bridge. How could I forget such an incredible and terrifying experience? I guess it doesn't matter since I remember it now. But there was something else I realized about that night, something I hadn't remembered before. When I heard her whisper, I thought I only heard unintelligent garble. But that's not true. She did say something. She said, Maraming Salamat, translated to English means thank you very much. I really like this ghost story the best. Not just part 2, but part 1, because both were believable to me, so I really enjoyed them. Let me know in the comments below if you like the ghost story in part 1 better than you like the one in part 2, or vice versa. Thanks for watching Paranormal, True or False.